So you want to run your own truly private VPN or host your own cloud for yourself, your family, friends, or even clients. What you need for that is your own Linux server. And the number one thing that stops people from this whole new world of possibilities is security. The fear of being hacked. So let me introduce you to lazy high security. So we're only going to be doing things that have a real tangible impact on the security of your server. And we're not going to be doing anything that just makes you feel good or is a best practice but doesn't really help that much. And your invest here is 3 to 5 minutes to actually run the commands and get your server safe. Because as soon as you come online, you'll be hammered from hundreds or thousands of other machines. That's bots, infected PCs and servers that will try and brute force their way into your machine to then use it for nefarious purposes. And that's the exact use case and the threat model that we'll be handling here. And after we've gone through that, I'm going to talk a little bit about security implications. And if you want to feel safer, there's a few extra steps you can take, but you don't have to. Now, what you will need for this, of course, is your own Linux server, a VPS. Now, there's lots of providers out there. There's lots of comparisons out there, so I'll leave a few links in the description and in the first comment on this video. I personally, and I'm not sponsored by them in any way, if I want something within the EU, I very much like Always On because they are rock solid, super fast, something like 3 gigabits per second. They're a tiny bit above average price-wise, but I've had very good experiences with them. Otherwise, if you don't want the EU or don't have to specifically host in the EU, then you could go to Vultr, Linux Server, or DigitalOcean. There's many options out there. Make sure that you don't overbuy. Most services let you upgrade. If it's for a VPN, the smallest virtual server will be quite sufficient. Now, the very first thing you want to do is you want to be absolutely sure that you have a safe and complicated root password. So some providers will let you choose a password while you're registering and buying your VPS. Others will send you an automatically generated password via email, and you definitely want to change that password. So you type in passwd, hit enter, and then you put the new password in twice. The idea here is you will not really need the root password later on, but you have to at least set one now and then save it into your password manager. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have the latest software, the latest patches, the latest software versions, and in most cases your VPS will be running a Ubuntu or Debian kind of Linux. It's a distribution, and that is the most ubiquitous one. If you get to choose the Ubuntu if it's your first Linux machine or a Linux server, simply because that will be the easiest for you. There will be the most documentation, the most answers in forums, and the most people that can help you. And updating is a simple thing. The packet manager is apt, and that will let you manage and update everything. So you type in apt update, and that will make sure that you will be pulling the newest, you will be checking all the repositories and pulling the information on what packages can be updated. And then we're daisy chaining this command with an ampersand and adding an apt upgrade, which will then install those new versions. And we're putting in a -y at the end to confirm all questions that might crop up while you're doing this. Now, I have just recently updated, so for me, it's a very fast thing. Your server might take a little bit longer, so just let it do its thing, you'll be just fine. The next thing you want to do is you want to create a new user. Why? Because that will be the user you'll be really using if you have to log into the server. The root user we will be disabling later on, because nearly all automated attacks against your Linux server, and there'll be tens of thousands of them, will always try to log in as root. And if you don't allow root logins, well then most of those attacks won't work out. But for that, we will at least need another user to be able to log into the server at all. So we'll type in add user, and then you add a username. Now please refrain from using admin or your first last name or any names that are connected to yourself, because next to the automated attacks there might just be a person that knows you and we'll try to then at least guess the login name, and we don't want to make it easy for anyone. So here I'm going to add a user named Pizza, and it will ask you for a password. Now make sure that this password is a long password. I would very much recommend you going for 40 characters, generate it, make it a mixture of uppercase, lowercase numbers and special characters, and that will then be your main line of defense, because any automated scripts will try and brute force their way in if they manage to guess the username. So make sure it's a good password. And this add user script will ask you a few more questions. Just hit enter, you don't have to answer any of them, and the server doesn't have to know your full name or room number or anything like that. Confirm that your information is correct, and there you go. You've got your new user, and the next thing is we want to add this user to the sudo group, so this user can get root permissions and then do any run any commands on the server. You will need that for maintenance, for updates, and for all kinds of other things, so we'll have to do that. So for that we do usermod -a capital G, and then sudo, that's the group that we want to add. Super user do is one of the explanations what that means, and then the username itself, which was pizza. And you press enter, and now you've added your new user to the group sudo, and then it should be able to become root and run commands as root, as the super admin on your Linux machine. Before we want to rely on anything, we have to test it. So we're gonna try and see if this user really has been created and if this user can sudo. So su, and then the username you've created, in my case that's pizza, and now I am logged in as pizza. This user seems to be working, and a sudo -s will allow me to become root. I have to put in the password. Now this is the password of the user pizza itself. And I typed in the password correctly, and now I am root. So now we have proof that this new user can log in and that it can become root. Now you could do an extra test and really log out, open up a new terminal, PuTTY or PowerShell or whatever else you use to connect to a server, an SSH client, and then log in again as the user pizza in my case, just to be absolutely sure. I know that this will work, so I'm not going to do that now. Now we're going to disable logins as root. That's what I explained just now. That's why we created the new user. In this case, we will be editing a file with nano, that's an editor, and this file will be in /etc/sshd_config. And hit enter, and now we are in the file itself. There's a few things one can do here, but the main thing that we're interested in is the line that is, in my case, right at the bottom or very far at the bottom, and that is permit root login. And this is already set to no. Usually, well, it will have to be set to yes, otherwise you couldn't initially log into your Linux server. So change it to no. So then you'll have disabled the root login, and then all those scripts will not be able to log in as root anymore. To save in nano, you press Ctrl X, you confirm with a Y, and you hit enter, and that was it. If you don't have nano, if nano in some way doesn't work as a command, then you would put in apt install nano, and then you'll get the nano editor installed quite quickly. The last essential step you have to take is install Fail2Ban, because that will essentially make it impossible to brute force yourself into the server itself. And the idea here is, even if tens of thousands of servers try and guess your username and your strong password, they will be blocked out and ignored, and then it will take decades to guess your credentials, and that will essentially make the server safe. A good practice here is to really log in as the new user that you have created and work with this new user so you can rely on it really working. To install Fail2Ban, you put in a sudo apt install Fail2Ban, and I like adding a -y just because I don't want to have to confirm things on the way. Hit enter. It will ask you, of course, again for your sudo password, which is the password of the user pizza again. And in my case, it has been installed already, but in your case, you'll see the installation running now. To get Fail2Ban to work, you need a configuration file. And there's an example file already that you just have to copy and then modify a little bit. So in order for that to work, we'll start off with sudo, cp for copy, and the example file is the source file, is in etc fail2ban and then jail.conf. And now we have to put in where we want to copy it. So that will be /etc fail2ban and then jail.local. Hit enter and it will copy the file. The next step will be to edit it. And you guessed it right, nano is our friend. So sudo nano, and then we put in the file location, that is etc fail2ban and then jail.local. Hit enter and there we are. Now this file is a very long file, and please don't play around with it. We only want to make a few very small modifications. So in this case, we'll scroll down and you'll find, after all these comments, the ban time. That's the number of minutes, seconds or hours that the client will be banned. And in this case, I would, for testing purposes, you can put it to a minute or two just to try it out. But in production, I would put in a full week. So in that case, a full week in hours is 7 times 24. That's 168 hours. So we'll put in 168H, and the find time is the time that the attacker has to make his or her failed attempts. And you want to put that up. If you would say this is only 10 seconds, then every 10 seconds they can start their next try, and it won't be counted towards the maximum amount of tries. So you want to have a rather long time here, so 24 hours. And the max retry is how many failed attempts you'll accept, and I like setting that to 2. So you've got 2 tries and then you get banned for a week. And that makes it quite strict and quite safe. Press Ctrl X, confirm with a Y, press enter, and now we've saved our configuration file. Now we have to start the Fail2Ban. We put in sudo systemctl start and then the name of the service, which is Fail2Ban. Now, if anything is wrong with the configuration, you'll get some kind of error message here, and then we want to enable it permanently. That means sudo systemctl enable and the name of the service, which is Fail2Ban. Hit enter, and now your Fail2Ban is on and running. Now, how do you test it? Well, with these very sharp settings, I'd be very careful testing it, because then I'll be locked out for a week. So in this case, you might want to open up a hotspot, a private hotspot, or with your phone, or connect to a different internet connection, maybe of your neighbors, or go to your mom's place, wherever, and try the login there. Future Editing Me wants to add something. If you change your Fail2Ban configuration, the easiest way to get it running is just to reboot the server. So sudo reboot or sudo init6, and then the server will come back up and the new Fail2Ban configuration will be active. Now, the very last essential thing you have to do is make sure that all ports that you don't need are closed. You want to keep the attack surface as small as possible. Now, the professional way of doing that will be just to make sure that no services are running that you don't need, and that no ports are listened to or running that you don't need. But since this is probably your first Linux server and you're probably more on the beginner level, the easiest and most effective way for you will be to use a firewall. UFW is a great way to go. You put in sudo apt install UFW. Usually it's pre-installed, but you can just put in this command because if you've got it, it will say you've got it, and if you don't have it, well then it will disinstall it for you. So now we have UFW installed, and the next step will be to check what ports are actually running. And that's quite an interesting thing because you'll be amazed what kind of ports that you definitely don't need will be running on your VPS or Linux server. So sudo ss and then -top ln. Hit enter and you'll get a long list. And I'll scroll up for a moment here. Here this is port, and you'll see I've got port 13800, port 11081, I've got port 80 for web servers, port 443 for SSL. So there's lots of ports open, and most of them are completely unnecessary, especially if you're only going to be using it for a VPN or for a cloud which has certain ports and doesn't need any others. So here we really want to reduce it to an absolute bare minimum. The bare minimum would be port 22 for SSH. So let's start reducing the ports. So we'll start off with the sudo UFW status. And here it will show you all ports that are allowed. These are all the rules. There's IPv4 rules at the top, and then there's rules that have in brackets a v6. Those are the IPv6 rules. And we want to reduce everything that we don't need here. So that will be, in my case, everything except for port 22. So to block ports, you put in a sudo UFW deny and then simply the port number you don't want. So I'll put in a port 80, and here the rule has been updated, and if I put in status again, the port 80 is now denied. So that's a rather simple thing. I'm going to quickly clear up the ports here and just leave 22 open, and I'll speed up the video for that. And there you go. A new sudo UFW status shows me that the only port that is allowed is the port 22, and that's my SSH port that I am using right now. And so there you have it, all ports have been cleared up, and now you're done. Or are you? Yes, if you just want to have a safe Linux server that you can rely on, that you can now use for all your other things, you're done now. If you install a VPN like a WireGuard, for example, please remember to then allow the port here. You would do that with the sudo UFW allow, and then I'll just put in port 12345. Rule has been added, and if we do a new status, you'll see that that is now an allowed port for IPv4 and IPv6. Now you're done. You can lean back, you've got your safe Linux server that will withstand nearly all automatic attacks that will hit it. But you want your server to be safe in the next week, month, or years. And in that case, you want to have automatic updates, or unattended updates as they are called. And in this case, there's a huge discussion on this. Updates might break your software, but if you're just using it for a VPN, for your own VPN, for a private cloud, and a few other things, the chances that something will break are very, very small. But the chance of you not really updating and running old software, that is usually quite large, and you don't want to usually spend time on this maintenance. You just want to know that it's working. So in that case, we will install unattended upgrades, and that's a simple thing. You put in a sudo apt install unattended -upgrades, and I'll put in a -y, and in that case it will now install, pull the code, and there you are. You want to set the priority of these updates low. So just in case there's load on the server, things are happening, you don't want to then have the updates running right then and then maybe taking away some of your CPU power. Especially if you've taken a very small VPS, for example, for a private VPN, then you really want to save your CPU time. You might be streaming something over it right then, and that's maybe not the best moment to run updates. So in that case, you want to put in a sudo dpkg minus or hyphen reconfigure, then priority is low, and then you have to name the packet that you are intending to hit, and that is the unattended minus upgrades. Enter, and now it will just ask you with tab or with left or right, you move the cursor, you want to mark the yes, hit enter, and now you're done. The server will be automatically updating, and you can lean back and now you are really done. Or are you? Yes, you are. Now that's it. You really are safe today and in the next weeks, months, years, at least as safe as you can be without putting in hours and hours and hours of extra work. And this setup has served me very well for years with lots of Linux machines. There's one thing that can make it a lot easier for you. That will be SSH keys, key-based authentication. In that case, you don't have to put in passwords anymore, copy and paste them in. You create an SSH key and then you log in with that automatically. Feels a bit like black magic, but it works very well. There's a small security gain in there because then you would disable all logins that are using a password, and then no login attempts work anymore from the automated scripts. But because we set up Fail2Ban very, very strictly, I don't believe that that security gain is that huge. Yes, it's there, but you don't have to go there. Because if you're a beginner, and I guess you are, you will have to then now start managing your SSH keys. You will have to backup them, because if you really disable password-based logins in your server, then those keys that you have in your home folder, they're the only way of getting into the server. And if you lose them, you will be locked out of your server. So I would always recommend doing this and managing your keys, but as a beginner, maybe that's not the best and first thing to do. That's why I'm going to put that in a separate video. There's also lots of best practices for security, as in changing the default port of SSH. There's also quite a few other little tweaks that can be done, but they add a minute bit of extra security. So for beginners, I wouldn't go through that hassle, because you have then all kinds of other things that you have to think of. Now, one last thing, this is now the base. This is what you can use to install your VPN with WireGuard. There'll be a video coming up on that, and also running your own cloud, as in Nextcloud or maybe Syncthing. Absolutely fantastic software to de-Google your life or de-Apple your life and really take control of your own data. Please remember, you've set up a firewall, and if you install anything now, WireGuard or anything else, you will have to remember to open up that one port. That is a typical mistake which has frustrated me as a beginner decades ago, that I will then forget to unlock the port and then just really not understand why something is not connecting. So keep that in mind. The firewall is doing its job. You'll have to drill holes into it as soon as you start adding your services. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up to show the YouTube algorithm that I've been doing a good job, that you really enjoyed it, that others should see it. And why not join me on my journey to become a digital independent, and let me show you more ways of de-Googling your life and taking back control over your data. Thank you so much for your time and your interest, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.